This is Paxton Quigly. He's the most popular boy at college. The girls' college, that is.
The boys here at Zeta claim the guy made over 50 scores by the time he was a sophomore, Mary.
It's unbelievable. See what Yvette Mimieux and these two girls do to him in Three in the Attic.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're going to catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me.
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're going to make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first.
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Hi, welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we are two in the studio talking about Three in the Attic from 1968.
Three in the Attic was directed by Richard Wilson, written by Stephen Yafa, based on the novel Paxton Quigly's Had the Course by Stephen Yafa, produced by Richard Wilson for Hermes Productions, executive produced by Samuel Z. Arkoff and James H. Nicholson.
Three in the Attic stars Christopher Jones as Paxton Quigly, Yvette Mimieux as Tobey Clinton, Judy Pace as Eulice, Maggie Thrett as Jan, Nan Martin as Dean Nazarin, John Beck as Jake, Eva McVeagh as Mrs. Clinton, Reva Rose as Selma, Richard Derr as Mr. Clinton, Honey Alden as Flo, and Tom Ahearne as Wilfred.
Three in the Attic opens on the campus of Willard College. It's a men's college, and we learn that a women's college, Fulton, is just 1 mile away. As the screen fills with the image of Ford Hall, a narrator tells us that you've heard of the sexual revolution. I'm probably one of its first casualties, Paxton Quigly. He says he's being held prisoner by 3 females and tortured to death. He then offers to take us on a tour of the groovy little subculture, Today's Female.
Now we have a brief film collage as the song Paxton Quigly's Had the Course plays. You may have heard it before. Once that's over, we enter a college dance. Our hero, Paxton, comes in with a mousy girl.
She says she wants to go boogaloo some more.
And while he's talking to her, 2 of the other fraternity bros that live there describe his conquests, 50 scores in 1 year. Paxton sends the mousy girl out for a drink. Then he wanders off on his own. He walks down a hallway and downstairs and enters a bar where only one person is sitting. This is Tobey, and she's reading on a bar stool, alone. The woman sees him in the bar mirror checking out her ass. She asks what's so special about her rump. He says it hovers above the stool like a hummingbird, but she's not impressed. He says female butts are practically public property, ew, and compliments her hair, so he knows he's not only interested in her butt. She goes to leave, saying all men are bastards in French, saying boys like him are boring.
As she leaves, Paxton starts talking about Genesis, Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, and she turns around. He attributes the quote to Kierkegaard, and now he really has her attention. He tells us that pulling the right quote from a book can be like pulling back the covers of a bed. And it worked because now Paxton and Tobey are in The Shack. It's kind of a diner/coffee house / hangout on the college campus. He's reading to her, and she admits she may have made a mistake before, but that he came in like such a clod originally. He introduces himself, and she to him.
She's enraptured by him, even after he says his name is Paxton Quigly.
Later, Paxton is talking with his friend Jake. Tobey's there too. They're not playing lacrosse, but they have the equipment to start playing if they wanted to. Tobey runs on ahead, leaving Paxton and Jake alone to talk.
Jake tells Paxton that he hates to see a stud grounded. All the other fraternity brothers are really invested in his love life. But Paxton says that it's just for the summer. He and Tobey are shacking up in Provincetown. Then Tobey summons Paxton over to where she's standing. Apparently she tried to catch a squirrel in her lacrosse net, but it escaped. She may be kidding. Paxton seems a little sheepish here as Jake watches him with his silly girlfriend.
And we're treated to one of many montages in this film. Winter turns to summer, and Paxton and Tobey enjoy their time together, swinging in swings, running under piers, and breaking plates at home, climbing into dryers at the laundromat, and grocery shopping.
On another day, Tobey is trying to put contact paper on the cabinet shelves, but most of the paper is stuck to her clothes and hair. Paxton comes in with groceries and feeds her fresh produce. Then she tries to eat a raw artichoke. Later, they erotically eat a cooked artichoke, flirtatiously. Even later still, they are snuggled in bed and he reads her to sleep.
Now it's Labor Day and summer is near its end. Tobey and Paxton are having a mundane conversation when they're surprised by a knock at the door. Tobey's parents have arrived unexpectedly. Tobey throws some clothes to Paxton as she opens the door. Paxton is shirtless except for a yellow sweater tied around his neck. But instead of covering himself, he just drops the clothes onto the floor as Tobey's parents come in. Tobey introduces Paxton as a neighbor who has come to play his guitar for her, but her mother, looking around and seeing the men's clothing strewn around the house, figures out what's going on. Our daughter is living in sin.
I think it was the pair of tighty-whities she found that gave that away. Mrs. Clinton tells Tobey that she's coming home with them now, hustling her into the bedroom to pack her things. Tobey's dad stops Paxton as he's ambling to the bathroom and asks why he's not in the bedroom defending his daughter against his wife. Paxton says she's not a little girl anymore. He doesn't think that she needs his help. He offers Mr. Clinton a drink, which he gratefully accepts. But Mr. Clinton takes the bottle from a shaky Paxton.
Mr. Clinton realizes that his daughter is a grown woman and can sleep with whomever she wants, and he has no say or problem with it as long as that someone is a man.
Well, you did ask if he was a pothead or a pansy, but Paxton denied both.
Then Mrs. Clinton comes storming out of the other room, saying, "Let's go." Mr. Clinton follows her out. Tobey remains behind to tell Paxton that she thinks they're really good together and maybe this brief time apart will be good for them. She leaves, shutting the door behind her. Paxton opens it to call out after her, but finds Mrs. Clinton waiting for him in the hallway. "She'd better not be pregnant, young man," she says. Paxton closes the door and turns to us and asks where has she been the past 5 years.
I guess the pill means that no one gets accidentally pregnant anymore. Hooray. Now it's 2 weeks later, and Tobey has returned, so it was a very brief separation. She and Paxton are reunited on the stairs of her hall, blocking some poor woman as she's just trying to get down. So they go outside, and Tobey gambles about the lawn and declares that she'll never go home again. They kiss on the porch, and that segues into a montage of them frolicking on campus amongst the fall leaves.
Later, Paxton is riding his motorcycle down a dirt road when he's flagged down by a girl. She asks what he's got there, and he says it's a Yamaha, and she asks if he can give her a lift. He says he's going to Ford Hall and asks where she's going, and she's going to Dewey, which is another dorm on the Fulton campus. And she asked if he's from Willard, and he is. And she asked if he knows Walter Zimmerman. He's supposed to be the best lay at Willard, and she's hoping to try him out. She says her name is Eulice, and Paxton says his name is Walter Zimmerman, because of course he does. Then Eulice asks if Ford Hall can wait, and if he's ever been painted, as she climbs onto the back of his bike.
Later we see her at her studio. Paxton is posing bare-assed as she paints him. Eulice decides that her masterpiece is done. Quigley covers his bits to come see the finished work, but it's just a pop art rendition of his face. He asks why he had to be naked, and she says she wanted to get a little peek. Paxton gets dressed, and Eulice says that she owes him one nudity now, but Paxton still has that woman waiting at Ford Hall. Despite that, Eulice manages to maneuver Paxton to dine with her at the shack. Eulice says she just transferred there from Howard because blah, 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 she didn't like any of the people there. Paxton sees the woman from Tobey's dorm, who is on the stairway behind him and Tobey. He doesn't want her to see him with this other woman, so he hides his face behind a menu till she passes by. Then he finally gets to talk. He asks if a bigoted negress and a bigoted wasp can find happiness together in the middle of Vermont. "We'll see," says Eulice.
So Paxton takes Eulice to a motel. This is a motel that Paxton would frequent in his womanizing days, and the owner wonders where Paxton has been all this time. Paxton says he's been retired, but it looks like he's coming out of retirement. "Tease them, tickle them, just don't let them tie you down," says the motel owner.
The gross old motel owner.
The room is a $3 room, but for Paxton, it's $1.50. And the owner offers to help in any way that Paxton might need him to.
Ugh.
Paxton stops at a phone booth to call Tobey because he did have a date with her tonight, and he tells her that he has to study and won't be able to make it out there tonight. Then he joins Eulice in the room.
They're in bed together. She says that she gots to be in love first, but apparently she loves him making piggy noises at her because they do it. In the afterglow, she says if his name isn't Walter Zimmerman, it oughts to be.
Later, Paxton is hanging with his friend Jake again. Paxton explains that he was seduced, plain and simple. Jake asks if this girl might know Tobey, and Paxton says it's hard to say. Then he asks Jake if he thinks he's losing his moral fiber, because Paxton hasn't felt any guilt about what he's done.
Sometime later, we see Paxton on his motorcycle with Tobey on the back. They're driving to a cabin in the woods. It turns out this is Tobey's aunt's ski hut. It's actually a very large A-frame house. There's no snow on the ground, so nobody's going to be skiing. The two of them are standing on the deck, looking over the woods, and Tobey suggests that they sublet an apartment that her friends have and won't need for the winter. Paxton reacts badly. He jumps off the deck, down the stairs, and walks into the woods. Alone.
Later at dinner, Tobey brings up the apartment again, and Paxton says she should have inquired if he would be interested in moving into an apartment instead of just packing his bags for him. Then Tobey says she's lost a dime. Paxton asks what she means, and She says her father had bet her 10 cents against the rent that if she were to ask her mealy-mouthed beau to move into an apartment, he would either split or flip. And he went on to say that guys like him like shacking up over the summer, but prefer to spend their winters under the protection of a fraternity banner. But she put her money on Paxton.
Paxton says, so that whole apartment thing was a put-up, a test? Tobey confesses that yes, it was. Paxton damns her and hurls a dime at her, and then storms out of the kitchen. He goes to bed alone as Tobey sobs on the kitchen floor. Then Paxton goes to the balcony, from which he can look down on Tobey. He tells her to get off the cold floor for her butt's sake. Then he goes to the couch, where he plans to sleep alone, but she curls up behind him. They're together, but still alone, not touching each other.
Later, Paxton and Jake are hanging out together again. Paxton says that some women, the worse you treat them, the harder it is to get rid of them. Jake says, yeah, but when they start testing you, the fun is over, and is Paxton sure he hasn't put all his marbles in one basket?
Later at the frat house, Quigley's out on the lawn with one of his buddies. Someone yells out from the house that he's got a phone call. He walks in to the communal phone and answers it. It's Eulice. He asks how she got his number. She said she tracked him down via contacts. He tells her he's not a free agent anymore. So she starts teasing him with thoughts of shower sex and her robe being open and her naked underneath. He makes up his mind. He tells her to leave the back door of her dorm unlocked, and he runs out of the house, jumps on his motorcycle, drives it into the woods, hides it in a ditch near a tree, throws some leaves on it, and starts running down a hill towards the dorm.
As he's running, he trips and falls into a circle of paper flowers being presided over by a hippie woman. She asks, "Did you have to land just there, sir? My flower collage, unsalvageable, was to be a horticulture cosmos."
There's a flower for every one of the planets.
And frankly, she did not expect the apocalypse so soon. Paxton starts pulling burrs out of his clothing and asks if this is where the hippies hang out. And she says she wouldn't know and asks what caused his sprint. Paxton can't say, and she introduces herself as Janet Sarah Weingard.
She looks at Paxton and asks if a woman can be both Jewish and psychedelic.
Paxton doesn't have an answer to this question, but Janet continues that she doesn't believe it either. And then she asks Paxton if he knows that he gives vibrations of extreme tension, and he agrees that this could be a thing, yeah. And then she asks if he's good at conflicts. He tells her that he's bad at them, and he's even worse at being put on. It makes his petals wilt. Then she asks if he thinks that she scares men away, and he says definitely. In fact, he's planning on running back up the hill faster than he came down it. She looks hurt, but then she asks again, "Are you good at conflicts?" He gets up to leave, and a voice says, "It might be better to stick around a bit, Mr. Quigley," which is interesting because he never gave her his name.
I didn't catch that. She does use a voice that's more forceful and powerful than her usual soft-spoken tone.
Yeah, he doesn't recognize the voice, and he asks who said that.
She says that that's her id speaking through her. Her id doesn't know that she came from a conservative lox and bagel upbringing. Janet wants to know if Paxton wants to discuss this further. He says he only talks to women in bed after. She says yes, indicating that she's fine with that. Then she moves in for the kill. Later at the same motel, Paxton is getting a room and also on the phone calling Eulice to lie about studying for midterms.
He asks her to keep her robe closed until tomorrow, and the owner once again offers his services if Paxton needs a little help. In the room, we see that Janet has painted flowers on her face and all over Paxton's back, and she asks if he likes her magic brownies.
Paxton wonders what happened to Janet's id, and she says it only emerges when men are compassionately defiant. He makes those dumb piggy noises at her, and she demands to be taken home immediately. She puts on her poncho and goes to stand by the door. He grabs her and starts forcefully kissing her, but she begs him to stop while they're still friends. He does, then he makes up a story about being gay, queer as a $3 bill. She asks for how long, and he says, since the middle school swim coach, ... And she fills in the rest. She compassionately jumps him.
Later, Janet apologizes for smearing his marigolds that she had painted on his back, and Paxton says she surprised him. He really did think he was queer. Later, hanging out with Jake, Paxton tells him of his latest conquest. Jake thinks Paxton is something of a god, successfully meeting the challenge of hooking up with 3 different girls from the same small school without any of them knowing about it. But the truth is, Paxton is still hung up on Tobey. He says he has been running around nailing chicks like a madman, and finally he's met a girl that puts him at ease, and he's still running around nailing chicks like a madman. Jake is into this challenge, though. He wants to make up maps and diagrams so Paxton can continue his conquest without the girls finding out about each other.
Later, in their room, we see that Jake has drawn a diagram of the girls' dorms and their relative distance from each other on some butcher paper and tacked it on the wall. He's strategizing with Quigley on how to duck and cover when he encounters one of the girls at an inopportune time. Jake is quizzing Paxton relentlessly, and Paxton's getting a little tired of it. He asks Jake to spread the word that he's secretly pinned to Tobey. Somehow that's going to help him in his plotting.
Well, it will, because he'll have a more difficult time pulling this off if his reputation as a womanizer still is out, so.
That's true.
So Paxton sets up his entire schedule for the month of January, splitting time between his 3 girls and even giving himself a night off to watch Bonanza. And then we see January through montage as Paxton makes his way through the weeks, spending equal amounts of time with Tobey, Eulice, and Janet, but Bonanza gets a little less time.
Fortunately for Paxton, because he looks absolutely spent here.
After fading to black, we hear Paxton tell Jake that things seem to be getting a little out of control.
Let's see how out of control they can get. When it fades up, we see Tobey and Paxton in a lecture hall watching a film. It's one of those old movies with cars chasing around, and it kind of represents the frantic pace of Paxton's life right now. The lights come up, and Paxton looks down to see both Eulice and Janet sitting separately on a lower level. He drops his head to his knees and feigns illness.
Tobey says, "Paxton, what's wrong?" And hearing the name Paxton, both Eulice and Janet turn their heads, but they don't see him. Paxton says he just has a stabbing pain, and Tobey says he's ash white. When the lights go down again, Paxton takes the opportunity to exit, telling Tobey he'll meet her in the lobby.
We see them later in Tobey's room. She's meditating, and he's wearing a tablecloth draped on like a toga. Then he starts kissing her neck, which irritates her. Paxton says that meditation isn't his bag, but she tries to explain that meditation is like kneading the lumps out of dough, except it's with your brain. Paxton asks if he gives her the lumps, and she says yeah. He's like a tap dancer, always endeavoring to keep her entertained. In order to keep her entertained even further, he plays her a song on his guitar. It's one of his, and it's actually good. And it's their anniversary present.
He says he hasn't given her anything all year, so she can have all the royalties west of the Mississippi.
Tobey is very touched by this song. She has tears in her eyes after it's over. And not because it was terrible. She loves it. And she loves him. It's very obvious. She pulls him into an embrace. And from what we can see, it seems that Paxton is also in love. Very much so with Tobey, despite all his actions to the contrary.
Next time we see Paxton, he's riding out into the woods. He hops off his bike and does a handstand.
I thought maybe he's going to meet chick number 4, but that didn't happen.
Paxton rides back to his own frat house, and it's a mess. One drunken individual sitting in a chair tells him he's missed pig night, and it wasn't the same without Quigley, but that there's still stuff going on downstairs. So Paxton goes downstairs to find the party is still going on full swing. Guys are gathered around one girl dancing in her skivvies, and someone tells Paxton they found her at the laundromat.
This is the pig of the night, I guess. This woman is a little overweight and a little dowdy, but she's not hideous. The frat bros point out some of their drunk brothers in the corner. Then the woman passes out. She's flat on whatever stage they had her dancing on. One of the brothers walks up to her, pours his can of Budweiser on her face, and says, "I christen you Queen Pig." Paxton is disgusted. He tells them to lay off of her. The bros can't believe this mild act of decency is coming from Paxton. But when he goes to check on the woman, she wraps her arms and legs around him and starts kissing him. To the bros' further amazement, he breaks free and then runs through the drunk asshole gauntlet to get out of the room and go outside.
Paxton is walking through the woods and thinking, always tap dancing, shut my eyes and pump. Is that all I'll ever do? Whatever that means.
I think one of the bros said, "Shut your eyes and pump," when the woman was wrapped up around him.
And then we get a montage of moments of Paxton and Tobey together.
Paxton wonders if there's more to life. Is he possibly actually in love? Next we see Paxton coming out of an upstairs apartment. The landlady comes out from the front door and asks if he wants to rent it. He does, and he wants to know if he can move in 10 days. As he's signing the lease, he spots Eulice across the street. He finishes up with the landlady, goes to chase after Eulice. She asks for the key back first, though. Once he returns it, he's free to go find her.
She's gone into a building, and he peeks in the window and sees that she's teaching a class of grade schoolers. She has them practicing conjugating verbs when one of her students points out the creepy man peering in the window. So Eulice goes out to talk to Paxton. He asks about her accent, which went from Aunt Jemima to Ralph Bunch, and her answer is basically, "Don't bother me at work." Then she returns to her class.
Paxton monologues to himself that women are always a mystery, and you don't solve any part of that mystery by going to bed with them, because in bed they can really confuse you. In Jake and Paxton's room, Jake asks if Tobey has already moved into their apartment. Paxton says he hasn't asked her yet, but he will tonight, and that Jake can be their first dinner guest. Jake bemoans Paxton's happy love life. Paxton says that Janet and Eulice are up for grabs now. Jake said he'd rather play a tough game of lacrosse. Paxton says that he needs to figure life out while it still matters, and he's going to do it with Tobey's help. But Jake just can't be happy for him.
He can't believe that Paxton is willing to give up everything he's got just to live with one girl in a split level. So the new Paxton goes over to see Tobey with a spring in his step. He doesn't notice that she's been crying as he flops down onto the couch. Tobey tells Paxton it's been quite a week, and Paxton says yeah, he's got a lot to talk to her about. She stands up and says she's got something of his, something he's never collected. She unlocks a door and leads him upstairs to the attic. As he follows her upstairs, he says that he thinks she'll really like the place he got for them.
She brings out a canvas wrapped in newspaper. At last, Paxton sees that Tobey's been crying, but she shrugs off his hand when he reaches for her. She unwraps the canvas. It's Eulice's painting. Tobey found it in an art gallery on campus, signed Eulice. The words "I can explain" start to head in the direction of Paxton's mouth, but Eulice herself steps out of the shadows. "Look who done shone," she says. Eulice explains that it didn't take long for Tobey to find her, and then they got to chatting. And Tobey's been bawling since Tuesday afternoon.
Then Eulice says she's gotten to thinking, if Eulice is Monday and Thursdays, and Tobey is Fridays and Saturdays. And then Janet pops out of the shadows as well. Queer as a $3 bill, huh? She says.
Meet Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Eulice drawls, 7 nights a week, huh? You better thank the Lord it didn't fall off.
Janet thinks what Quigley did to Tobey was awful, but the three girls have a plan for him. They've left a sleeping bag for him in the corner. Tobey won't even look at him. Eulice and Janet go downstairs. Paxton says Tobey, and she goes to him, helps him remove his jacket, and goes downstairs, leaving Paxton Quigly alone in the attic.
A natural stud's paradise, as they say. From Yvette, Paxton hears Tobey say that they will all swear they know nothing if anyone finds out about him being in the attic, and all three voices agree. Then Eulice details her schedule, saying Quiggy won't believe all this action. She might just have to paint another picture. Paxton gets comfortable and claims he won't give in first. He hopes.
Sometime later, Tobey goes upstairs, walks over to Paxton, lays him down in his sleeping bag, and starts unbuttoning her shirt. Eulice and Janet are downstairs. Tobey silently finishes with him, gets dressed, and goes downstairs in tears. And then there's a montage over the next few days as Eulice goes to the attic, then Janet, then Tobey again.
And at first Paxton seems not to mind. In fact, he seems kind of into it.
Eventually, enough time has passed that notification of Paxton Quigly's absence from several of his classes has reached the dean of his college. The dean suggests that they send out a notification to nearby colleges and ski resorts and to check with his fraternity house, but don't notify his parents just yet.
In the attic, Tobey brings Paxton some food. And he calls her McVeagh and says it's not medically possible to kill somebody this way. But it doesn't matter anyways. He's on strike. No more hanky-panky.
If she's listening, she's not letting on. Instead, she pushes dust toward him with her broom. As he's coughing, she unzips her jumper and walks towards him.
She's prepared to mount.
Later outside, Tobey has a brief powwow with Eulice and Janet. Tobey tells the others that Paxton has stopped eating, and Eulice asks where is he going to get the strength. Tobey tells them to do what they can, and as they leave, we see the conversation was overheard by one Selma Temerwitz.
She looks like Velma, and she acts like her too.
The regular visits to the attic continue. Janet brings a book featuring the taboos of the world, for which Paxton dons a pair of glasses for a better view.
We get to see it too. Outside Tobey's room, Selma hears the co-conspirators talking. Eulice goes on about how Quigley loves steak. Selma tries the attic door, but thinks better of it and tiptoes away, creaking the floorboards in the process.
Selma's assuming they're keeping some kind of animal up there, so she immediately goes to report it. After all, it's her duty as a member of the dormitory council. So she goes to Dean Nazarin, the dean of Fulton, and she reports that it's obviously a carnivorous animal up there since it's eating steaks, not a possum or a raccoon, likely something larger, and it's referred to as Quiggy. The dean checks her records, and not one of the girls Selma has named is studying zoology or a related field. Then the dean asks if this might be a product of her imagination.
Selma says no, then the dean dismisses her. She gets up and drops her books on the floor. She clumsily tries to pick them up, and as the scene fades, she asks that her name be left out of it. Up in the attic, Paxton finally looks shagged out. He seems thinner, he's grown a beard, and he looks weak. And then he dies. Well, not really. The three women are down in Tobey's room confabbing about Paxton's health. He couldn't have a heart attack at 20, could he?
Tobey says that this was Paxton's choice. He wanted all three of them at once, and so he's got all three of them at once. Dean Nazarin receives a call from Willard Men's College. It seems they mislaid one of their students. His name is Paxton Quigly, and he's been seeing a student at their school, Tobey Clinton. The dean writes this information down in her sketchbook of doodles.
We're back with Paxton. He's still dying. Eulice asks if he hasn't been eating his wheat germ. She gives him a steak, but that doesn't move him. She says that Paxton can't peter out now and offers some mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. But he's really out. She goes down to where Tobey and Janet are waiting. Eulice has never seen him so pooped before.
Janet is worried. She says it's been nearly 2 weeks since he's been up there, but Tobey reminds them that they had an agreement, and Eulice goes off to finish a painting. And Tobey goes to class.
At the frat house, the bros debate where Quigley could be. He didn't enlist, that's for sure, and he's not been to the motel on Route 9. Some of the brothers checked there. Jake vows that they won't give up. They'll find him.
Next, we see Tobey on the phone. She's been called for a meeting at the dean's office the next morning, and she wants to find out the reason why, but they won't tell her.
Selma witnesses all this, but she doesn't see Tobey go up to the attic. She's finally ready to talk to Paxton. After days of the silent treatment, she wants to know why. Was it because of their argument on Black Friday at her aunt's ski lodge? Paxton says he can't say really, and if he could, he wouldn't. And Tobey stomps off down the stairs, locking him in again.
The next morning, Tobey is sitting in the dean's office for her meeting. The dean, waving her pipe around, and as she's speaking, tells Tobey that an associate of hers is missing from his college and a carnivorous beast is rumored to be hiding in her attic, and she can connect the dots. Tobey says that he's getting what he deserves, and the dean says it seems he's been treated rather well. She tells Miss Clinton, Tobey, that a women's college is not a whorehouse. Tobey insists it's not like that, and again says he's been treated as he deserves. The dean is intrigued. Revenge? Isn't he clever enough to escape?
Tobey says he's been outmaneuvered. They sapped his potent masculine strength.
Sapped his strength? The dean asks. I don't. Tobey blinks slowly, and the realization comes to Dean Nazarin. Oh, I see. He's not dead by any chance. Dying, says Tobey.
The dean offers to have amnesia if Tobey would smuggle Paxton out of the dorm by noon tomorrow, but Tobey refuses.
She says they loved each other completely, and she has given everything to him, and he to her. She says you don't teach someone to laugh out loud, and then, well, you just don't do that.
Dean Nazarin asks when Paxton will get his freedom. Tobey says when he tells her why. Dean Nazarin says perhaps Paxton doesn't know why. Who understands men anyway? They're such a guilt-ridden lot. She tells Tobey to contact her when he's served his time. She owns a station wagon. That was the funniest line in this whole movie.
Tobey and Eulice and Janet are talking downstairs. The game is about over for Eulice and Janet. Tobey insists they're going to do things her way. Eulice tries to convince Tobey that she's not only killing him, but she's killing herself too. And Eulice implores one more time for Tobey to let Paxton go before she and Janet leave. Tobey sits in silence, trying to beat herself at chess.
But that's what's happening. We're a voiceover of a woman saying a woman's true education takes place outside of a college. In the attic, Paxton zones out and hallucinates a scene where he walks into a mob of female students in the dorm who seem to be cheering for him. He walks outside and the students follow. He gets on a stage and then he bellows out, "I accuse!" He points to Tobey, Janet, and Eulice sitting on a couch watching him. He accuses them of holding him captive, ravaging him. He repeats, "I accuse." And then the mob starts turning on the women. But they also start grabbing at Paxton. Then inside of his hallucination, he collapses there too.
Tobey goes up to the attic with a candle and a hamburger. She offers the hamburger to Paxton, who takes it to his mouth but doesn't take a bite. Tobey informs Paxton that the attic door will be unlocked and he will be freed. If he is discovered, she asks that he not involve Eulice and Janet, because it was their decision to free him. But Tobey still insists that this whole thing doesn't make sense without a reason. She begs him to tell her. He finally says it wasn't her. Tobey says, "We were so good together, damn it," and smacks him across the face and runs downstairs.
Paxton stumbles to his feet, tumbles down the stairs. Opening the door, of course, Selma is right there. She screams at the sight of this stumbling, smelly, bearded man outside the bathroom. Then everyone on the rest of the floor opens their door and they come out to see what all the fuss is about. They all swarm on Paxton. One of them throws a fishing net on him, and then somehow Selma finds a sitar and brains Paxton with it.
News must have traveled fast because all of Paxton's fraternity brothers are on the scene of this girls' college by the time the ambulance arrives to take Paxton off to the infirmary.
Everyone except Tobey congregates around the ambulance as it's leaving. In the ambulance, Paxton is given oxygen, then has an out-of-body experience, but he's not quite dead. He sees himself flying through the air, then curling up beside a tombstone.
The tombstone has an angel on it, and the head morphs into that of Tobey's.
It's all very strange. But he comes to, back in the ambulance.
And next we see a hearing is being held against Tobey, Eulice, and Janet. Tobey arrives late and says that she alone is responsible, not them. But it has been decided that the behavior is damaging to the school's reputation, and the recommendation is suspension. Eulice is upset that this will reclassify her 1A.
She'll be eligible for the draft now. The woman holding the hearing says that Dean Nazarin told them that there was more to this story than meets the eye, and asked Tobey to comment. But Tobey is mum.
Then they say that the suspension was suspended due to the negative publicity the school might receive. So the official story is that Paxton Quigly locked himself in the attic, unknown to anyone, faculty or student. They are informing Willard College to that effect, and they are informing the three of them to that effect as well.
And Eulice says, I guess Quiggy gets the shaft. Tobey leaves the hearing in silence. In the infirmary, Jake tells Quigly that they're going to hunt the bitch down, but Quigly just wants him to check the dorm again to find Tobey.
As for Tobey, she's walking down a country road when a station wagon pulls up next to her. It's Dean Nazarin.
She does have a station wagon.
She offers Tobey a ride, and Tobey accepts. The dean asks Tobey about her plans, and Tobey says she has just planned to take some time and clear her head.
The dean chuckles and says that non-swimmers should never leap bare-assed into the sea of love. The sea of love, they say, is full of squid, but some of us think that land is too dry.
Eulice goes to the infirmary where Paxton is being treated, and she tells him that he'd better get out of bed right now.
Get his white butt out of bed right now.
He jumps up and follows her outside. They get into her VW bug, and she takes him to the bus station where the dean has already dropped off Tobey. Paxton jumps out of the car, and Eulice says that true love just makes her sick.
Agreed.
Tobey is already on the bus. Paxton says he needs to talk to her, and he starts wrestling baggage away from the porter.
Since Paxton won't let go of the bags, the porter grabs him, the bags, and throws them all into the cargo hold of the bus. Then Paxton barricades himself in. I guess that feels natural to him after 2 weeks of imprisonment.
Tobey, who has disembarked the bus, asks him to come out of there. Paxton tells her that they've come through, and she climbs in closer to him. Paxton gently grabs Tobey's necklace and pulls her towards him. They kiss, and the luggage attendant shuts the door to give them some privacy.
And the movie proper ends, but the show's not totally over. In an animated sequence, we see two eggs discuss the movie that we all just watched. They're Harry and Sybil. They go home from the theater discussing it further. Harry wonders when's the last time they went into the attic and would like to go again, but Sybil says no way. Then they climb into the bed, etc., etc. It's really stupid and boring. And that's the end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we're talking about Three in the Attic from 1968.
Three in the Attic began as a screenplay by Stephen Yafa called Paxton Quigly's Had the Course, which won a Writers Guild of America award for Best Student Script in 1964. Yafa was then 23 years old and studying for a master's in playwriting at Carnegie Tech. Yafa said he wrote it out of venomous contempt for all the claptrap I'd ever seen that presumed to examine the sex life of young Americans and only succeeded in vilifying our lower regions. Yafa went out to Hollywood and worked on a project for producer Harold Hecht that was never made. He turned his script into a novel, which was published in late 1967.
In November 1967, AIP announced that they had purchased the script, and Richard Wilson would direct. Wilson told the Raleigh News and Observer that he found the script and started searching for the talent and money to make the movie. He formed his own production company, Hermes Production, and then got the backing from AIP. Filming started in February of 1968, by which time the title had changed to Three in the Attic.
Much of Three in the Attic was filmed at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, from the end of February through March. When producers from American International approached UNC about using parts of the UNC campus for their new movie, Chancellor Carlisle Sitterson appointed Professor William Hardy of UNC's Radio, Television, and Motion Picture Department to the task of reading the script and deciding whether or not the film was appropriate to be filmed at UNC.
Hardy approved the script, writing to the Chancellor that he only found one scene in particular to be considered marginal in taste. In the same letter, he remarks that he is aware that there were some other scenes with sexual overtones in the script, but it did not contain homosexuality, any other perversion, or violence. With this dubious approval, the filming commenced.
The film provoked some controversy on campus. A reporter from the Greensboro Daily News said he was denied entry to the set as the set was closed for a nude scene. The reporter, Jim McAllister, then wrote an article saying the film was a skin flick. After that, the Chancellor received a flurry of letters questioning the integrity of the university.
The campus scenes depict Carolina's Polk Palace, Keenan Dorm, and the administrative South Building in particular. The radio and television department was paid $2,000 for the use of one of their studios, taking it over from the university for a month. Students and other locals were paid $12 a day to play extras. In a scene where Quigley is mauled by the group of co-eds, and Selma hits him over the head with a sitar, gashing his forehead. Christopher Jones got lucky for that scene. The sitar, rented for $50 a day for the film, was half the size of the one the production designer had in mind for the shot.
The location for the Zeta Chi house is actually the Alpha Tau Omega house, and the production crew spent 3 days filming there. Scenes are shot in front of the house, in its great hall, and in the house's basement, also known as the cave.
One planned location for the scene where Quigley picks up Tobey on his motorcycle, a picturesque country lane in Chapel Hill, had been completely leveled in favor of a 2-lane highway. The Raleigh News and Observer wrote, "So off the caravan went with his wind machine to find another romantic little winding road." I found a couple articles written at the time of this filming, and it caused a huge stir on campus. People were really excited about it, and there's just a lot to find out about this. I didn't include half of the things that were listed.
According to the AIP Pressbook, when the female students at UNC saw Yvette Mimieux and Maggie Thrett in costume, it caused a miniskirt mob, a sellout of local boutique selection of the skirt style. The photo collage title sequence was designed by Sandy DeVore.
British duo Chad and Jeremy recorded the original songs and instrumental backing music for the film. The soundtrack album contains the duo's own version of Paxton's song, Smoke, which Jones sang in the film. The album was released in the U.S. on Sidewalk Records in 1969, with a CD reissue by Curb Records in 2013, and it was actually pretty successful. Quentin Tarantino uses the film's signature tune, Paxton Quigly's Had the Course, on the soundtrack of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
In April of 1968, Daily Variety stated that cast and crew had recently returned to Los Angeles, California after shooting at UNC for 5 weeks. Shortly after, the LA Times noted that Jones, who had earned a bad boy reputation as a star of the television program The Legend of Jesse James, was rewarded for his good behavior on 3 in the Attic with a 2-week, all-expenses-paid vacation in New York.
Good for him. A world premiere was initially scheduled to take place in early June 1968 at the Hermes Film 68 Festival, part of the 1968 World's Fair, in San Antonio, Texas, as noted in the May 1, 1968 issue of Variety. However, the premiere was delayed until December 20, 1968, when the film was set to debut at Chicago's Oriental Theater.
3 in the Attic was released in 3 U.S. cities on December 20, 1968, and had its Los Angeles opening on January 31st of 1969, and in New York City on February 26th of that same year.
Taglines for 3 in the Attic include, "Some men are starved for love. Paxton Quigly's problem was completely the opposite."
He's the exhausted captive of 3 young ladies with a unique idea of revenge.
Paxton Quigly is a prisoner of love and completely exhausted.
You're Paxton Quigly, a legend in your own time, but you're being cut down in your prime by a trio of vengeful young women merely because you gave your affectionate services simultaneously to all 3.
Paxton Quigly's crime was passion, and the punishment fits exactly.
That long was a terrible tagline.
Yeah.
3 in the Attic was AIP's highest-grossing film of the decade. It was the 18th most popular movie at the U.S. box office in 1969.
By spring of 1969, a Variety box office chart reported a cumulative domestic gross in select U.S. markets of $2,132,040. A later edition of Variety said, Yvette Mimieux was poised to benefit from the film's commercial success since she owned 10% of the picture. Smart lady.
3 in the Attic led to a less successful semi-follow-up titled Up in the Cellar, which was retitled 3 in the Cellar when it was paired with 3 in the Attic for a future release. Judy Pace starred in both, but as different characters.
Due to the film's success, Wilson then signed a 7-picture deal with Universal. Jones was announced for another AIP film called We Outnumber You, but that film was never made.
In 1974, Samuel Z. Arkoff said the film was AIP's highest grossing to that point. He put this down to the theme of the picture, saying, Jones should have been a big star, but got sidetracked by some nervous problems.
Writer Stephen Yafa disowned the film. After the film's release, he sent letters to the trade papers that read, "The released version of American International's 3 in the Attic bears such a slight resemblance to the original screenplay from which it was shot that I cannot in good conscience accept the screenwriting credit that was given to me for it."
Ted Mahar of the Oregonian wrote, although made on the cheap and showing it, Attic still has some good things going for it. Jones gives his best performance to date. Even here, he doesn't do what you would call a finished job, but he shows some genuine promise for the first time. He reportedly hates to be compared to the late James Dean, but the resemblance is so spookily close that one can't help noticing. However, if he continues to develop, he will eclipse Dean, particularly when he adds his own embellishment to the character.
Mayhar continued, saying, Yvette Mimieux is better here than she has been under better directors. Still, her principal appeal is visual. Mayhar also complained about the tacked-on, cop-out happy ending, saying that the book ending was better.
Ben Kern of the Minneapolis Star-Tribune wrote, I think it is significant that the story was written by a man. I doubt that a woman would have asked other members of her sex to believe that 3 college girls would agree to maneuver their mutual boyfriend into a dormitory attic and, working in shifts, wreak vengeance on him by perpetual coitus, calling the plot, This is Strata in Reverse.
Vincent Canby of the New York Times said 3 in the Attic was, quote, more raunchy and less funny than any other AIP film I've seen. It's a fantasizing projection of dearly held contemporary myths about romance, sex, humor, ethics, aesthetics, art, and movies. In its eclectic way, it's also in bad taste on almost a staggering number of levels.
Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times complained about the story, saying, Now if 3 in the Attic had simply stuck to this theme and played it straight, it could have been a great movie. Since moving out of its crab monster and beach party bag, American International Pictures has shown a certain daring in handling social themes, Wild in the Streets, The Wild Angels, The Trip. But all 3 of these movies, and now this one too, chickened out of the implications of their subject matter and wound up with flabby, inconclusive second halves.
Well, we know what everyone else thought of this movie, but as we always do, it's time for us to give our thoughts. What was your first impression of 3 in the Attic the first time you watched it?
First impression is these are some weird names.
Absolutely.
But I'm surprised that Paxton Quigly hasn't become slang for something in today's vernacular.
Well, there is an author using the name Paxton Quigly who issues advice on self-defense for women, obviously using guns, but that's not really slang.
No, but it's interesting that it's a woman who took the name Paxton Quigly.
Well, apparently she had the course as well.
I'm not sure what the point is of this.
I don't know either.
This whole exercise. It's
to be shocking?
I guess. I don't know what these girls expect to get out of this. I know Tobey just wants a reason why, but I don't think they're putting Paxton in any position where he would need to tell her or want to tell her.
No, it's a really badly thought out plan of vengeance, if you ask me. I agree with the one reviewer who said no woman would ever expect other women to believe that they would come up with this plan. Only a man would.
And the plan's ridiculous because they're all sleeping with him anyway.
How is it punishing him?
Right. I mean, if all they're doing is taking sex from him, they were getting that anyway on their regular schedules, and they're still pretty much keeping those schedules, it seems.
One thing that just occurred to me is that they kind of make him hate sex, and maybe they're breaking him of his sexual proclivities by just giving him too much of what he thinks he wants. Maybe this will make him think twice before he ever even has sex with anybody again, now that he's been in a position where he can't refuse, which in itself is pretty gross. That
it really messes up the ending then when he and Tobey get back together.
Yeah, I think the ending didn't match the rest of the movie at all.
What kind of relationship is that going to be?
A better movie might have had them break up, him go off his way, her go off her way, maybe date somebody else, and then they find their way back to each other and realize that they really were in love. They were just too immature to, or at least Paxton was too immature to see that at first. But introducing this vengeance sequence, it's titillating for sure, but to me, as an audience member, it doesn't make any sense, just like you said.
Yeah, and we read the Roger Ebert review, and I'm going to agree with him. Taking into account what you just said about it being titillating, this is AIP not really pushing the envelope, but just kind of showing that they have it.
Yeah.
Maybe nudging it a little. I don't even think they're putting a stamp on it or addressing it or anything.
They want to play with the big boys, but they don't want to commit all the way and lose any audience goodwill that they've built up over the years.
And that's always been a problem for AIP. They've got this reputation as being exploitation films, but Jim Nicholson and Sam Arkoff are really conservative guys.
Mm-hmm.
And we take something like Wild in the Streets. It's really tame compared to what it should be. And The Trip, they tacked on that ending with the cracked screen. We haven't talked about that one yet, but It's pretty well known that, drug use is just bad. Don't use LSD. And even something like Bunny O'Hare, they're robbing banks, but they question, should we be smoking weed? Is this legal?
Yeah, they don't have the courage of their convictions, to be sure. They want to be edgy. They want to get press, but they also don't want to betray their conservative roots, I guess.
Their lax and bagel upbringing.
Exactly. Well, I don't know about Nicholson, but Arkoff for sure. But then by this point, Nicholson was kind of fading away from day-to-day operations. He didn't really want to be part of it anymore. He wanted to be a family man. And Arkoff was taking over. But he still wasn't young, and he wasn't going to have the sensibilities of the young writers and actors that he was hiring. And he was the one making the decisions. So he's pulling the punches, not anyone else.
So the other thing that really stands out in this movie is the music. The music's pretty good here. That song Paxton Quigly had the chorus is kind of catchy.
Very bouncy. I enjoy it. And I like the song that Paxton sang for Tobey. That was it's very short, but it was very sweet. I put it on my iTunes playlist. But seeing Christopher Jones in this movie made me miss the Christopher Jones from Wild in the Streets. I liked him a lot better there. He was still a bad guy, but he seemed more focused. Here, he's just shambling through life. I don't even think he wants to get laid for his own sake, but just to live up to his fraternity brother's picture of him. He wants to be their hero more than he wants to have sex. I think he would have been happy if he had settled down with Tobey without Jake always on his shoulder complaining about him, being a one-woman guy. But
I don't know about that, because I don't think that Jake had any influence when he met Eulice on the road.
No, that's true. But
he said that she seduced him, and I think she did, but he also allowed himself to be seduced.
Right, but why did he allow himself to be seduced? He's telling Jake. Jake is the bad angel on the one shoulder who doesn't want him to settle down with Tobey, doesn't want him to be a monogamous man. He's always gassing him up about his reputation and inflating his ego that way. So in a way, he's part of the temptation. Yeah, the women are the temptation, but this ego thing is also part of it. And the sad thing is that he is really happy with Tobey when he allows himself to be. When they spent the summer together in Provincetown, when he played that song for her and she loved it, and the look on his face said that he really was in love with her. And he was really looking forward to getting that apartment with her. Now, he didn't want her to know about everything else he's been up to. He was just going to let that slide, and that's not cool, but he really wanted to have a future with her. And at that point, he didn't care what Jake thought. Or I guess the twist was that by the time he wanted that, it was too late. He'd been discovered. Kind of making this movie a tragedy.
Almost, but then that last scene changed everything. And,
right, and it shouldn't have.
And it all worked out, yeah.
It shouldn't have. It should have ended sadly, because that's everything leading up to the end of the movie was sad, and nothing else would have made sense.
Well, if this had been made 3 years later, I'm sure it would have had a more depressive ending. But this was still the 60s.
Right. They still had hope back then. This was pre the Tate LaBianca murders, which affected Christopher Jones so badly that he left acting at that point. He was so upset. And I think that was kind of like a pivot point where we stopped expecting happy endings, maybe.
Yeah, Christopher Jones and his wife, Susan Strasberg, had both been signed for 3-picture deals with AIP, and they both did only 2 pictures. Susan did The Trip and Psych Out, and Christopher Jones did this and, of course, Wild in the Streets.
But all that was derailed.
1968 is when they got divorced. And then with the Manson murders thing coming on, and a 3rd picture just didn't seem to be in the cards for either of them.
No, I think he intentionally retired from acting. So maybe that's why they didn't make that movie. And it's kind of sad because he really is a likable guy, and he's attractive, and he probably could have had a career that eclipsed James Dean eventually, but it just never happened.
Yeah, he probably would have been an Angel, Down We Go, a.k.a. Cult of the Damned.
I guess this movie is kind of a great vehicle for him because he is in almost every scene, but
if he's not in the scene, he's the subject of the scene. They're still talking about him.
This movie will not pass the Bechdel test, but he had a lot of opportunities to shine here. And I think he did a good job with the material, except for his diction's not that great. He does mumble his way through a lot of lines.
And one more thing that kind of struck me about this film is every time he meets a woman, they cut back and forth between the two of them.
Oh, yeah, the editing. There's some very annoying editing choices here.
I thought that was pretty effective to show what is going on. Did it need to be done? No. It just kind of enforces that idea that these people are seeing each other, and not just seeing each other, they're seeing each other.
Yeah, but when he met Tobey, the cutaways were between him and her butt. So he only saw her butt to begin with. But he was a changed man after Tobey, so maybe that's why he started looking at faces. Do you think that what effectively was a gang rape was underplayed in this movie? Because I think so. The fact that it's women on men, I think that gets treated like a joke, and it shouldn't be. But obviously this is 1968, so that's what's going to happen.
Well, because it's women on men, at least at that time. And a lot of times in this time, that's just not considered rape.
It is, though.
It is, but it's not considered rape.
That makes it hard to enjoy this movie these days, for me anyway, because I just really hate that they did that. Honestly, I think that was a terrible plan, and not just for their sake, but for his sake. He didn't deserve that. Yeah, he's awful. He deserved to be called out by all the women in every dorm, put up a sign and say, don't date this man. He's a cheater, or something like that. But what they did was just disgusting. And I hate that for them. I just don't think you would remake the movie today and get the same reaction. I would hope.
No, today you just take away his Wi-Fi.
There you go. Yeah. Leave him up there to stew and nothing to do but look at Hindu erotic art. Maybe they should have denied him sex. I think that would have been more effective and more palatable. But I didn't write it, and even the guy who wrote it didn't want to claim it, so...
Well, really the only punishment would be castration, because he could take matters into his own hands if he's denied sex.
That's true. Maybe if they tied his hands up and then put a bunch of nude pictures around where you could see them. Well, anyway, I don't want to think of tortures for some fictional character. Let's rate the picture. With our usual scale, A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic. What do you give 3 in the Attic, Jeff?
Well, back when we did Wild in the Streets, I said that wasn't one of the first films that comes to mind if you think AIP, but it's maybe one of the second. And I would put 3 in the Attic up there as well as one of the second. It's an important film in AIP's history. Did it break boundaries? Maybe at the time. It definitely went up to the line at least. And as Arkoff said, it was the most profitable film at that time for AIP. And it's not a bad film. It's definitely not a great film. It's the stuff that's dated in it is kind of interesting because it's more like Janet's character and her hippie tendencies that seem less out of place, especially in looking at the time, because this is when the sexual revolution was really coming on strong. And so I think this is why this movie was able to be made in 1968, because it showed women taking sexuality on themselves, even if it did it in a weird, disgusting way.
Right. Well, join the club. Men can be disgusting, and so can we.
But it's definitely not a bad film. It's an okay film. I'm going to give it an I. What are your thoughts, Cheryl?
I did think of something that we hadn't mentioned yet, and that's that tacked on credit sequence. The 2 eggs, the old man and old woman telling us what movie we just saw and what they thought of it. And that's incredibly dumb. And as atonal as the ending is, this is even worse, where they basically are just riffing on the movie after it was over. I think it's so stupid, and it really detracted even further from my enjoyment of this movie. The one person I really identified with in this movie was Tobey. Everyone's been hurt romantically. She was devastated, and I think Yvette Mimieux did a good job of conveying that. I'm not really familiar with her work, but I think she did a really good job here. First she was ecstatic, and then she was miserable, and then she was angry, and I think she did a great job of holding that in, then letting it out. One thing that I noted in particular was when she was having sex with Paxton in the attic, her expression was completely joyless. She even cried one time, and I thought that was kind of powerful. Even though I didn't like what she was doing, I could see how much damage she was doing to herself at the same time. I think that's one of the high points in the movie is her performance. Eulice and Janet didn't really have a lot invested in Paxton. They could have easily just written him off as another bad choice and gone on to somebody new. But I think for Tobey's sake, they decided that they were going to help her out with her vengeance scheme. And as such, she didn't want them blamed when it all went public. So I understand that. I think that's the reason I'm going to give the movie an I instead of a P. Just because of that pain, that real emotion that she brought to the screen. Everyone else was kind of a cartoonish character, I think. Eulice and her fake southern drawl, and hippie chick Janet, and playboy Paxton with his stupid name, and Selma, the girl detective, sussing out what was in the attic. There actually was one other character that I really liked, and that was Dean Nazarin, who, you didn't really describe her much, but she's a middle-aged woman. She smokes a pipe. She's pretty smart. She figured out what was going on in the attic without a lot of exposition. And she offered to help Tobey. She didn't just immediately do what she should have done, call the cops. She allowed her to process her emotions. And she's very funny. She's just a great character. I wish we could have got more of her. So for those reasons, like I said, I'm going to give it an I. But there are a lot of things in this movie that are dated and also unpleasant. And that keeps it from being an A movie to me.
One other thing we touched on but didn't really talk about was the fact that Eulice is black. And in 1968, that would have been seen as pushing the envelope.
True. And they didn't have a lot of like kissing scenes. The scenes with Tobey were a lot more intimate than the scenes with Eulice.
But they didn't do anything to acknowledge this racial discrepancy.
It
was just on screen and you could see, but there was no acknowledgement of it. And that was kind of cool.
Well, there was the scene where Paxton and Eulice introduced themselves to each other, and she's talking. We didn't say what she was talking about, but she's talking about when she was at Howard, the blacks were too black and the other blacks were too white, and she had to find her own path, and so she came to Fulton. And he called her a bigoted negress. Making them chant along with her. It's a really fun scene. The kids are so cute. And they're doing the conjugations all set to music, and she's snapping her fingers. And she talks to them, and I guess you would say like
I do, you do, he does, she does.
Right. When she talks to them, she's not doing that fakey Southern drawl. And I wish she had talked that way through the whole movie, but that's just a persona that she put on. So I think they kind of addressed the fact that she is black, but no one calls out Paxton for dating her. So it's not like they ignored it, but also they didn't emphasize it.
And one more thing that we didn't mention, but probably bears mentioning, is that Selma, played by Reva Rose, we saw her previously in Bunny O'Hare. She played Lulu O'Hare.
Just as annoying there as here.
But it's always fun to see some of these spaces that we recognize pop up again.
I think it's time to come down from the attic and stumble into the real world. For the American International Podcast, I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.